What exactly does this sick individual say to you?
Hello, Skullduggers. Rogues are the edgelord cousins of the fighter. They specialize in dispatching their enemies with dirty tactics, sneak attacks, and teleporting behind you while they say nothing personnel. This is our magic people that saw that Lion King song about the circle of life as a personal challenge, and decided to overcome it by stuffing their soul in the nearest Tupperware container to attain immortality. These two concepts simply don't mix. Or do they? Well, I'm Antonio D'Amico, this is Pointy, and we're about to make them mix and give you a rogue lich to take home with you for free in the very last episode of Witch Lich Rogue Edition. The end of an era. What a weird note to end this class lich series on after doing all of them, right? Rogues. Rogues are about as far removed from lichdom as barbarians. It's such a random choice for an ending. Well, there's two reasons. You'll see both soon. To mix a rogue with a lich, one must first know what we're mixing with. In this protracted, clumsy cooking metaphor, like all the other ones I love to do on this channel, we need to figure out our ingredients before we mix them together in our cake of awful. First up, the rogue. In order for this lich to feel like a rogue, we need to reduce the rogue to its most basic essence. What makes anything feel like a rogue? And I think that's deceptively hard. Rogue is one of those classes that plays differently from every other martial class, but flavor-wise, the lines dividing them are very, very thin. Like, think about it. Why is a swashbuckler a rogue and not a fighter? They don't hide in the shadows, they don't look like Shadow the Hedgehog, they're not really edgy. Why is an Echo Knight a fighter? I mean, other than having the word knight in there. Isn't the whole thing of making a copy of themselves, confusing the opponent with that copy, attacking alongside that copy to overwhelm an opponent, just very roguey? Like, there was an Earth Arcana for a fighter subclass called the Scout. Do you know what the Scout is? An official subclass for Rogue. Oh, and if you needed more proof, what is a fighter subclass called? That's right, an archetype. Do you know what a Rogue subclass is called? You'll never guess. So what is it? What is the essence du rogue?
Essence du rogue.
Well, I think it's deceit. A rogue fights dirty. A rogue does not care about fairness. A rogue will do anything to win. A fighter follows a tradition. A fighter studies the blade, or the polearm, or whatever other hyper-specific weapon weird nerds will get mad at you for not making a distinction between. Fighters do all this to become the best at fighting. Rogues do not want to be the best at fighting. They want to get the job done, and they'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. They are deceitful, underhanded, unscrupulous, dishonest, dark, dangerous, forbidden, enticing, magnetic, alluring, seductive, bewitching. Okay, anyway, you get it. It's not just pragmatism, it's ruthless pragmatism. It's a willingness to fight dirty, a reliance on underhanded tactics to accomplish your goals. Pocket sand, the class.
Pocket sand.
There's also such a clear element of stealing in the rogue, and that's something that I find DMs often neglect to give to players, the opportunity to steal something grand that makes you feel roguish. I'm just spitballing here, but how about the Magna Mappamundi? A collection of maps, charts, every single location in the world you could ever need, charted and ready to be explored or plundered by a rogue. From a reef housing the body of a dead angel to a glamorous cocktail lounge in the depths of hell. So where do we stick the Magna Mappamundi for our rogue to steal? Well, in cheipeku.com/pointyhat, of course. That's right, Cheipeku is back with everything. You know Cheipeku for maps, and for good reason, because they have the best maps in the business. Those examples I gave, those are real Cheipeku maps that you can download right now, and look at the variations. These are like 17,000 maps in one. You might also know them for their new tokens. You can make literally everything you ever want to make with their builder. We actually collabed to bring to life my Bard Lich. And you might also know them for their beautiful scenes to set the mood of not just combat, but roleplay encounters. And now, guess what? They're doing a complete fantasy bundle. You get access to all three of those, maps, tokens, and scenes, for the price of just 2 subscriptions instead of 3. Let me put that in perspective, because the numbers are insane. That is more than 6,000 maps, more than 2,000 scenes, and more than 300 hand-drawn tokens, and their token builder, so you can make your own at an insane discount. I have used Cheipeku products 100 times. I started with the maps because, my god, but now I've also used their scenes and tokens, and I absolutely love them. So if you want to subscribe to any of these individually, or get the bundle and get all of them for a crazy discount, check the first link in the description right now. And thank you Cheipeku for sponsoring this video. We got that, trickery, whatever you want to call it. That's a rogue's essence. Solid. So if this is the flavor of our food metaphor, what is the flour, the base, the dry ingredients, the thing that will be flavored by this rogue essence?
Essence du
Well, that's a lich, of course. A lich feels like a pointy hat lich if it chooses to become a lich, as in it's not a zombie. Lichdom doesn't happen to it. It creates its very own soul Tupperware as a key to its unlife. Something, anything, that houses all or part of its soul and is the key to a lich, you know, not keeling over at age 70. If some pesky adventurers smack the lich down, it will rise back up if its soul Tupperware is intact. The lich does this through some sort of ritual. The more complicated, the better, so that players can become this, but only at very high levels. And finally, a pointy hat lich needs to keep this whole undeath thing going somehow. It has to actively participate on undeath being an ongoing gig for it. Otherwise, undeath drops the un and the lich becomes just a spooky bag of bones. That's the pointy hat lich recipe, baby. Okay, so we have the essence du rogue.
Essence du
We have our lich base. We are finally ready to make this undead cake. No, not like that, you freak. Let's make a rogue lich. Remember when I said there were 2 reasons why I was leaving the rogue for last? Here's one reason. We have broken the rules established in the Pointy Hat Grandma ancestral recipe before. Our monk lich is the only lich that doesn't need to maintain its own life, except it has to worry about becoming a monstrous immortal thing detached from all semblance of empathy because of the loss of its humanity. You know, keeping it lighthearted and all. I think the rogue should break the rules, but not in the way that the monk did. The rogue lich doesn't break this little channel's rules on lichdom. No, the rogue breaks the rules on being a lich. The lich code, a little known offshoot of the bro code. Why? Because that is its essence. As we have defined before, if a lich's goal is immortality, do you think a rogue, a class defined by ruthlessly employing every underhanded tactic it can get its grimy little hands on to get what they actually want, would spend decades preparing a ritual or constantly upkeeping its immortality through hard work? Absolutely not. That is the least rogue thing it could do. If a rogue wants to be immortal, it would do so unscrupulously, taking as many shortcuts as that rogue can, making sure that it happens for the rogue through whatever means necessary. Our rogue lich won't be a paragon of undead virtue, a shining example of what it is to be a lich. No, our rogue lich will be a parasite to other liches. That's why it needed to be the last. Let's go. What it means to be a Skulldugger is to be hated by both the living and the dead. Products of necromancy are seldom afforded kindness among the living, as the association with the most malign school of magic invoke images not too pleasant to the average mortal. But in truth, a Skulldugger might be the only lich that does not pose an inherent threat to the living. Liches, on the other hand, have a much better reason for their hatred of the rogue lich, as Skullduggers are the only liches that make other liches their prey. A high undead parasite to the highest of undead. Their parasitism starts at the beginning of a Skulldugger's unlife. A rogue must foil another lich to be's ritual to become a lich. There's no set method for this, as there are as many paths to lichdom as there are liches. A Skulldugger to be could pass themselves off for a member of a Four Swords Oath, a paladin looking to become a lich, and instead of falling on their sword with the rest of the Sword Knights, take the necromantic power generated by the ritual for themselves. The Skulldugger to be could also foil the ritualistic mummification of the monk lich by ending the life of the future soul incarnate right before it attains self-sustenance. Or dispatch the martyrs of a cleric's ceremony to become an apotheosis, so that the rogue can become a Skulldugger instead. The victim does not matter. What is important is stopping the ritual, for stopping a ritual is the ritual to become a rogue lich. If the rogue scheme is successful, the rogue disappears, and a Skulldugger rises in their place. But a Skulldugger's parasitism doesn't end after it has attained lichdom. This relationship is at the core of their existence, for a Skulldugger cannot form its own spirit jars. Much like a Skulldugger to be must foil the plans of another lich to be to become a lich, a Skulldugger must foil the plans of a lich to continue being a lich. A Skulldugger will find the spirit jar of a lich and infest it with a piece of its own soul. The soul of the Skulldugger will, in time, replace the soul of the original lich trapped in the jar, and so that spirit jar becomes a spirit jar to the Skulldugger, and not the spirit jar of the lich that actually bothered to make it. The Skulldugger lives up to its roguish reputation by literally stealing a spirit jar from another lich. The more a lich has divided its own soul, the easier it will be for a Skulldugger to infest any of that lich's spirit jars, as less of a soul will be present to fight the influence of the Skulldugger. This is why Skullduggers rarely infect the jars of ranger, monk, or druid liches, or any of the liches whose method to attain lichdom doesn't involve the division of the soul in many spirit jars. They go instead for the spirit jars of former bards, barbarians, or sorcerers, those that ensure their undeath by dividing their souls in many small pieces. And so, as Skulldugger lives on as a true parasite of undeath, stealing the work of other liches and undermining their attempts at perfect unlife, this garners the hatred of all other liches, as by virtue of their own lichdom, Skullduggers are their natural enemies, but they also garner the adulation of those that hate liches. There have been many a tale depicting Skullduggers as dashing rogues, defeating liches and taking what's theirs, but the reports of Skullduggers as roguish defenders of all that is good and great are greatly exaggerated. A Skulldugger does not benefit from a lich disappearing, since liches are few in number. The more liches exist, the more spirit jars can a Skulldugger parasitize. It is therefore in the best interest of the Skulldugger to undermine a lich, but not to outright end its undeath, tracking which of its brethren still clings to life, always looking for the next soul jar to steal, ever mindful of not taking too many from the same source. For a parasite, however powerful, cannot live without a host. Okay, I bet you weren't expecting that. A parasite lich! A lich that unlives off of other liches. A lich that cannot make its own spirit jars, but can instead steal those of other liches. A lich that becomes a lich by foiling the ritual of another lich. I think that feels pretty roguish if you ask me. And come on, a lich that all liches hate? The adventurers write themselves. Do you ally yourself with the Skulldugger and let it take the phylactery of the lich for itself? If you do, you can't end the lich. The Skulldugger needs it to stay undead itself. What then? But as always, a monster is not a 10 out of 10 monster unless it gives players as much as it gives to DMs in terms of ideas for characters. So let's make a guy. Gyro became a Skulldugger by mistake, which is quite a feat. He was robbing a noble summer house blind when he fell through the floor, crashing one story below and raining debris and sharp bits directly upon the body of a soon-to-be reanimated sorcerer lich to be. Gyro, of course, died in the fall alongside with the hopeful sorcerer lich, but because Gyro had technically foiled the lichdom ritual before dying, he found himself awakening as a full-fledged Skulldugger, purely as a result of a Goldberg machine-like series of happy accidents, more at home in a comedy of errors rather than in a ritual to attain immortality. Gyro would have been happy to live the rest of his on life while continuing to be a petty thief alongside the closest thing he had to a family, the thieves guild that had taken him off the street as an urchin. Unfortunately, the sorcerer that had died under that pile of rubble was the distant relative of another, much more powerful lich, and a chromaton that runs the entirety of the industry in Gyro's country. The Artificer Lich was not too pleased with the death of her great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson, and so she hit the petty thief where it would hurt him the most. It didn't matter that she believed the thief was dead, that's just how petty she is, so that Artificer Lich destroyed the Thieves Guild and everyone inside as petty revenge against the thief she thought had already passed, in a display of pettiness only a lich is capable of. That lich was right, Gyro hadn't survived that fall, but Gyro hadn't died either. He had risen as a lich, and now he embarks on a simple yet impossibly difficult quest. He'll take down that Necromaton to avenge his guild, using his newfound powers as a Skulldugger to do so. But when Gyro is confronted with the first of the phylacteries of that Necromaton, will the fledgling Skulldugger be able to refuse the appeal of immortality? It would be so simple to turn that spirit jar into his own spirit jar, slowly depriving the Necromaton of potential bodies and making Gyro truly immortal in the process, with the added benefit of him no longer having to look like a skeleton, as Skullduggers only look like they did in life immediately after stealing a spirit jar, with their bodies slowly decaying soon after. But we all know what embracing the quest of immortality and lichdom can do to a person. Will Gyro lose himself completely and become what he set out to destroy, chasing immortality under the guise of revenge? That's a cool character to play, I think. You can play a Skelly guy. You can play Brook from One Piece. You can play a Lich, since a Skulldugger only feels like a Lich if it gets its hands on phylacteries. You can make that a part of the campaign and leave it up to you if your character actually embraces Lichdom or lets go of life after ending the Necromaton. Make him a Soul Knife Rogue, pick Reborn from Van Richter's Guide to Spirit Halloween as your species, and presto, you can play this guy. Fantastic character for a Lich fanatic. If you're into Liches, this might be the guy for you, but what if you want to play an adventure all about Skullduggers and not necessarily make a character about them? Well, Skullduggers only shine when other liches are also on the table, so why don't we make exactly that as our adventure? The Undying Republic has been run by a council of liches for all of living and dying memory. But it was only recently, after the latest member of the council was chosen to become a lich, and the resistance foiled the ritual, that this council has paid any close attention to those that wish to depose them. This resistance is led by none other than another lich, an extremely young lich, and she became a lich by foiling that ritual. Gara, the Skulldugger in question, has decided that the only way to defeat the Undying Council is by using lichdom itself against them. And she has become a Skulldugger to use the Skulldugger's ability to track down soul jars to find those of the council members so that the resistance may destroy them. Look at that! A lich is a good guy. Or is it? A Skulldugger needs other liches to survive. Does Gara really intend to disappear with the other members of the council? Is she ready to accept death? Or did she become a Skulldugger with some ulterior motive? Who knows? You, duh. Since this is our last lich, you know how this goes by now. Barbarian check, bard check, cleric check. Yep, all of them are done. We even got the artificer in there. I guess that's it for Witch Lich. Oh, that was ominous. Anyway, why not celebrate the total end of this series by watching some of the older ones? The Bard Lich was the first one and is still one of my favorites. Wouldn't be here without it. Love you, Queen. But what about the Ranger one? That one is a weird one. It comes with a friend. All right, end of an era for sure, for sure. Bye-bye. Mwah.